Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. And our main topic, of course, Patrick Mahomes versus Tom Brady. But before I get into that, I want to just talk about the Steelers. I know there's some rumors coming out. I think TJ Watt, there's been some controversy on whether he skipped the end-of-year team meeting. And then, of course, Ben Roethlisberger, not really sure what's going to happen there either way. I mean, I think you've seen Phillip Rivers, who I almost forgot to even mention last show, retires right as soon as we get the show done. So I was like, oh, thank God I mentioned him, because that would have just been so stupid on my part. Just because everyone from his class, I consider that same era, is almost retired. I think, is Drew Brees official now?
Yes.
So it really comes down to Ben, and we'll see what Tom Brady does, really. I guess you could consider Aaron Rodgers, but I mean, he waited a while to even come in, because I was having a debate over the weekend on how old he even was. I didn't realize he was in his late 30s. I thought he was younger, more around my age, but that's another one you can consider. But I mean, just hitting on those guys, Jeff was messaging on social media about Phillip Rivers basically being Dan Marino. That's not even true at all. Because I get that he played the stats and all this stuff, but he had LaDainian Tomlinson on his team. He had Antonio Gates. He had a good defense with didn't he have Junior Seau for a while, or was that before his time? I'm not sure. I can't remember the crossover.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know for certain.
Well, ignore that I said that. But I'm saying, he had a solid team that he could have taken to the Super Bowl. Dan Marino got to the Super Bowl. So I don't think you can compare the two. At some point, you have to win in the playoffs. I know we were going to talk about, coaching search stuff, and a name that keeps coming up is Marvin Lewis. And I think the stats were he's 0-7 in the playoffs. You can keep saying, oh, he's such a great regular season coach or whatever, but at some point you have to win in the playoffs, or no one's going to give you a shot. They're just not. So Phillip Rivers, great career. I don't think he's Hall of Fame, and he's definitely not this generation's Dan Marino. You could argue that Peyton Manning was that guy, losing big games for a while before he finally won one. I think now you're going to have a similar chance right now with maybe Lamar Jackson, if he keeps putting up super numbers, wins a couple games in the playoffs, but at some point you have to take that next step or you'll be forgotten. But we'll see. If Ben comes out and just makes a decision, I think then that changes a lot of things for the Steelers. But he's looking at two of his former guys, Le'Veon Bell, which I know he doesn't really play much. Even whenever their starting running back went down for the Chiefs, they put in Williams over him. And I know Williams had been with the team for a while, but that was a good chance to say, all right, Bell, show us what you've got. And they didn't even feel comfortable with it. So he was injured. He's supposed to play. Antonio Brown, which is a guy that I want to see succeed, just because he's almost like a redemption story where he almost just needed a solid leadership. And that's what I think is lacking right now at Pittsburgh. Guys wouldn't be missing end-of-team meetings no matter how you lost if there was solid leadership throughout the franchise. Because, once Tom Brady took Antonio Brown and said, enough's enough, he didn't have issues. He didn't really have issues with New England until his other stuff was already pushed down by the NFL. So, once he kind of got kicked out, then he went and started to have off-the-field issues. Tom Brady helped him get all that straightened out, and he hasn't had, really any issues all year. So some guys just need the structure and need that leadership stuff. But come on, Ben, if you want to stick around, I don't see how it's helping the Steelers if you're not going to go ahead and take that role and just make a gigantic push. And the one thing that stood out to me after the first game on Sunday, the Buccaneers won, I stuck around because I wanted to see what happened with Tom Brady at the podium. I know they were going to be peppering him questions, and I believe it was the Buccaneers owner. he came up and he was so excited, and he said, I only had the first part of the quote. I tried to write it down. But he said it only took one man to teach their franchise how to win. Basically, Tom Brady. So Tom Brady came in. He knew that he had a bunch of key pieces. And he's like, we wanted to get him. I knew Tom Brady was our guy. And he turned the whole franchise around. And so you can argue all the stuff about Brady and Belichick. I know I joked last week about if Brady wins a Super Bowl, he should just go in the Hall of Fame as a Buccaneer, because everyone that's going to try to write the articles about him and Belichick, that would piss them off. Because they would be like, well, why isn't he sticking with Belichick then? And so that's why I want to see that. Because I think that that's the big thing right now, is if you can take a guy, the Patriots fell apart as soon as Brady left. You could argue that if he was there this year, they would have been the same team. But the Buccaneers hadn't made the playoffs. I have this stat too. Because, let's see if I can even find it. But it was such a long time that they hadn't been in the postseason in 13 years, and they hadn't won a postseason game in nearly 2 decades, basically around the time they won the Super Bowl. So it's not like Tom Brady came into a great situation. It wasn't like I said, with Peyton Manning coming into the Broncos, where they're knocking on the door winning postseason games with Tim Tebow. Like, that wasn't the Buccaneers. I was shocked when Tom Brady picked them, because I thought if the 49ers were really interested, that would have been the team that you could step in and say, like, look, I know you guys are close. I can easily win a Super Bowl with you. And so I was shocked when he didn't go there, because to me, that was a similar situation with Peyton Manning going to Denver, Tom Brady going to the 49ers. It made so much sense. He goes back to California where he grew up. They were just in the Super Bowl. They have a great core. Their quarterback play was shaky. He could have easily put them over the top. But instead, he said, I'm going to go to Tampa Bay. And people talk about, like, oh, Tampa Bay had, I think you've even mentioned it, like Tampa Bay had all the pieces that they could set up. Tom Brady brought those guys with him. Like, Tampa Bay is the same exact team. The only difference is Tom Brady brought his friends with him. Antonio Brown, I guess you consider a friend, but he was with New England, got kicked out or whatever. He came back, and then Gronk, of course. But any team that he went to could have signed those two guys, because guess what? They weren't going anywhere else. No other team was signing Antonio Brown. It was basically Tom Brady saying, I'm vouching for this guy. Let's get it done. And same with Gronk. Gronk wasn't going to come out of retirement to just randomly play with the Buccaneers if Tom Brady wasn't there. So I think Tom, it's a little bit different than I consider, like, when everyone says, oh, they're comparing Tom Brady to LeBron now because they both played in 10 finals. Tom Brady went to the Buccaneers. Like I said, they hadn't been to the playoffs. LeBron went to the Heat to get his first championship, a team that had just won one a few years ago with Shaq. Like, he was going into a better situation. He knew that, like, this is the team that's going to get me the championship. Tom Brady was like, I'm going to go to the Bucs and I'm going to win myself. I'm going to do it. I think I can do it there. And that's it. Hey, go ahead, Matt. What's your arguments against that?
Well, you hit on, like, 3 different points. I think the first one, when you're comparing team to team, what was in New England compared to what was in Tampa, Tampa definitely was in a position to win right away. And take Brady out of the scenario. Number one, do you think Tampa wins as many games as they do?
No.
And the second part to that is Bruce Arians still the coach? Because up until that point, he was average. They weren't making the play. They were right on the bubble of not making the playoff. More than likely, they don't make that move. They're not making it. And more than likely, Arians is getting fired instead of being this super genius that he is right now. Another point to it is that when they brought Brady in, I mean, they completely overhauled their offense. And I'm not gonna throw collusion out there, but if you're Brady, you don't go into that situation unless there's some kind of conversation in the contract negotiations where they're like, we will put the pieces together for you to be successful. So they go out and they sign Leonard Fournette, who Pittsburgh should have signed. He was able to get Gronk out of retirement. Great pickup. They were able to pick up later in the year Antonio Brown. So it wasn't like he stepped into this situation in addition to having Godwin and Evans already and Brait. Like there was already a decent core of people to begin with. They just stocked the cabinets even more for this run. And it would have been shame on Tampa had they have not made a push with all those guys, because basically it was like the equivalent of starting a franchise in Madden and just signing like the top three free agents to boost your team right off the bat is basically what that boiled down to.
And I think that's the thing that annoys me with the Steelers. They're like, oh, we're going to ride Ben out for one more year. Get ready. We could make the Super Bowl. They're not even helping him. Like we said, Fournette was out there. Make a move. Try to bring some guys in. And if you think you have the weapons, like, let's go for it. But, like, Tom Brady would never have let the Juju stuff go on. Like, I just don't think that would have been a thing.
And the more that I was watching the NFC Championship game, the angrier I got. Because every time Leonard Fournette touched the football, I was like, he probably wouldn't have been able to run like that for Pittsburgh anyway. We don't need a big bruising running back just running over people, and that probably wouldn't have been a good fit anyhow. Just sour grapes.
And did you hear? Was it Troy Aikman that did the game? I think they were talking about you. You brought up the offense. They were saying like, oh, in the middle of the year, Tom Brady kind of just took over, and they shifted the offense even more. And I was like thinking, yeah, because it wasn't working. Like they had got killed by the Saints twice. And then Tom's like, let me just mix it around a little bit more. Because now they're throwing looks to other receivers like, is it Miller? Basically is just taking over like that Edelman role where you need a late catch. He's going to try to find a way to hit you deep. And it's working. Right before the half, unbelievable. And then the week before I told you where he didn't even lead him far enough into the safety. He just dropped it right in perfect. So he has like a security blanket of guys that you wouldn't even have expected. Like I don't even know if people would know his name on the Buccaneers outside of fantasy football players if Tom Brady wasn't throwing him these deep bombs. Like just randomly. So you got to be able to mix it around. And that's the other thing. Because like with Aaron Rodgers, for as big a name as he is, and they have Devontae Adams, why isn't he taking more deep shots? It was like they went into turtle mode. You're already losing by such a big amount. Like, let's try to get back into the game. You get close, and it seemed like they just shut down. They were like, all right, we're scared. I thought for sure that they were going to win, and it wasn't because of Tom Brady's interceptions, because first off, Evans, that one that he tipped, that should never have been an interception. It seems like Evans has trouble with Tom Brady, and I'll be honest, I'm surprised Tom Brady's still throwing with him because like there was the one broken play where Tom Brady threw it up and it was intercepted, and it almost ended up like a punt. So I wouldn't even really count that as like a bad interception. I think I saw the stats. All three of Tom Brady's interceptions ended up being on the other side of the 30-yard line, almost like a perfect punt. But the one that hurt the most was the one where they were driving and Evans it seemed like he didn't expect the ball. And I think that that's a lot of like some of the Buccaneers' issues where in the past, they weren't ready to get the ball because I don't think they knew like with the offense of what was going on. And so like, don't be surprised in the Super Bowl if Evans doesn't play a big role. Because I think out of all the receivers, he's the one guy that just looks like he can't get it. He's not like paying attention. He's not making the reads. And there's been a couple like big time drops. I know Godwin's had his drops, but he's at least put his hands on the ball and almost made catches. I don't see that from Evans.
Well, the thing that like I've watched over the last couple of years with even when Jameis Winston was quarterbacking, when Evans was catching the ball, Jameis played really well. When Evans was dropping balls, they struggled. And I think he's such a big target, and I want to see Evans play well just because of the potential of him to be a Megatron type receiver. 6'5", almost like forget how much he weighed, like 250. I mean, he's an enormous target. That's like he should be one of the premier receivers, and it's like he can't consistently focus and catch the ball, and it holds him back.
It's almost like, you know who he reminds me of? Plexico Burress. Because when Burress went to like the Giants, people were able to key on him, and he didn't really do what he did with the Steelers. With the Steelers, he wasn't really the number 1 or 2 option. And I think missing Antonio Brown hurt Evans more than anyone else on that team. Like, Godwin's always going to get the number 1 looks, but Brown is such a big name, and he's still such a good wide receiver that they have to pay attention to him on defense, or he will burn you. And there are specific plays in their book where they try to get him 3 to 5 touches a game and try to make something happen. So, like, the defense kind of has to pay attention to him. And with him being out last week, I think that role fell to Evans. And when the time came with it, he just couldn't deliver. And so maybe getting Antonio Brown back, it won't matter in the final game, because if Miller steps up again, you're looking at Gronk coming in, and even Brate has played great. That's like 5 or 6 weapons that Tom Brady has coming into the game, not to even mention Fournette in the running game, that if everyone's healthy, they have a chance to score. And I almost wondered, like, I was surprised at the end of the game that they didn't kind of turtle and just say, like, all right, we got a big lead. We're not going to try to make mistakes. But Tom Brady was still trying to win the game. And that's what stood out to me, the difference between the two. Because, like, if you're looking at that game and you're not a fan of either, you have to say, like, I got to give Tom Brady respect. They were throwing interceptions when they were up, and he almost gave the game away. But even at the end of the game, he's still throwing the ball in the coverage and getting that pass interference penalty. Like, if he was scared, he would have just threw that away and they would have punted instead of trying to put the ball into coverage and saying, like, you know what, I'm just going to win the game right now. And Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, he had a chance. I think it was 2 or 3 downs on that last drive where he could have ran the ball, at least got close to the goal line, if not have scored a touchdown. And instead, he threw in the coverage. And I almost wondered, like, why? John Elway, his legendary status is because he ran for that one, did like the helicopter in the midair and was it a first down? I don't think it was a touchdown. Like, just to keep the drive alive. And so Aaron Rodgers, you would think, he has to know no one is in front of him. They're not expecting him to run. Everyone thinks I'm a big-name quarterback, but I never deliver. I delivered that one time. I need to make a big move. This is my chance against Tom Brady. Instead, I'm just going to throw in a double coverage, spook my coach so bad that he sends the field goal team out. Because everyone's saying, like, oh, the field goal, I don't think if he would have ran it and got at least 3 yards, the field goal doesn't even come in then. I honestly think that was such a bad decision that the coach said, 4th and 6, there's no way Aaron Rodgers is completing this pass. We have to kick the field goal.
Well, I think that one of the big things that you're leaving out of that, too, is the fact that the Packers were missing their left tackle. Their all-pro left tackle was injured. And consistently, Tampa's defense did a great job of getting pressure on Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it wasn't all, you know, for as much as it's easy to lay all that credit on Brady closing the game out, Tampa's defense played phenomenally and consistently kept pressure on Rodgers where he couldn't sit back in the pocket and deliver the ball out. The one thing that I was wondering was why the Packers didn't run A.J. Dillon more. It felt like he was running the ball and he was running well. And then it was like they were going back to, I forget who the other running back is, and I'm drawing a blank. But
I'll tell you why. Because I've noticed this a lot as I'm studying games. I don't think Dillon is comfortable in the passing game yet. And I think that the defense can key on that. Because there were a couple times where he missed blocks, and then even when Aaron tried to check the ball down to him, it looked like he had stone hands. And so it's another coaching decision where it's like, look, we're trying to get you in the game, but if we put you in, they're going to know you're running the ball. So, like, you have to at least try to do something. And I'm surprised how bad he looked, to be honest, because I thought coming out of college, he was a more dynamic player. But so I don't forget, your left tackle point, Chiefs left tackle Eric Fisher's out of the Super Bowl with a torn Achilles. So they're going to have the same advantage.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's going to be a factor. And when you look at, like, to me, this is one of those fundamental, like, what's your coaching philosophy points that there were a lot of times that Green Bay was down towards the end zone or in the red zone. And even specifically with that drive, that it was like, how do you not run or have some kind of design run play to try to score where that you're getting the kind of pressures that you were seeing. It's like there was nothing to take the edge off. And I thought, yeah, Rodgers should have run, but I also at the same time, there was 4 minutes left when that play happened. So like everyone's like, oh, that was way too much time to give back to Brady. Like there was when they kicked the field goal. In theory, they were getting pressure. Brady had 3 turnovers. Hypothetically, even if they use their timeouts efficiently and get the ball back, they were going to have to score. They were going to have to score a touchdown because of the failed 2-point conversion earlier.
Well, that's my one thing that I'm glad you brought up, because I don't think it was. I was hoping I didn't make it sound like it was a coaching error, because I didn't mind the field goal. I'm always on the mindset, take the points. Even if they scored, they would have had to get the 2-point conversion. But if you're the coach and you're watching Aaron Rodgers make those decisions, you had to have been like, all right, what are we doing here? Why is he choking right now? Because like there were times where there was an earlier play where it was a broken play. Devontae Adams was wide open. All he had to do was just look to his left, and it was an easy touchdown. And they showed it on TV for like a brief second and hurry up and cut away, because Troy Aikman was loving on Aaron Rodgers so much. He was openly cheering for them. And I kept the sound on. Normally I mute it, but it was like, he's going to cry. He is going to cry because he hates Tom Brady. It was almost like every time they brought him up, you could just hear him like choking up in his voice. And he's like, Aaron Rodgers needs to get this done. And then they were like, I don't know why they kicked that field goal there, but I was like, you're already looking past the point. The coach didn't trust his QB. If Aaron Rodgers said, I'm going to take the ball, I'm going to run it, and I still think it's the same coaching thing. You're saying about how they could have run the ball. They're running the ball at that point, then they're basically saying like, we're not going to be confident in scoring. Like they weren't confident enough with the score as it is of getting a touchdown and getting the 2-point conversion, because you're right. Otherwise they would have been running the ball, but I don't think that they wanted the clock to run out, because I honestly think that they were playing because they needed 2 scores. Whether they kicked the field goal there or not, I don't think they thought they were going to score the tie it up.
But I think you take the points, and now from where they were, field position wise, you take the points. On the second down play, I think if Rodgers scrambles, I think it puts them closer to the goal line, that maybe you're in 4-down territory, you run the ball one of those plays to try to get within a 4th and goal, from the 1 or 2. I think that changes your play calling so much, because then you can play some of those RPO pop pass type things that I think Rodgers can make those throws confidently, as compared to where were they, like the 15-yard line or so. Like there's a lot more that the defense can do. It's a lot of space to cover, and I think that it kind of handcuffed them. And then after the 3rd down play, I think that was when I sent you that text and was like, he should have ran it. Like if he runs it on one of those plays, those are the kind of things that when you're getting into these bigger games that separate the teams that win from the ones that don't. The quarterback scrambles, and now that's the final missing piece that a lot of these teams. That's why when you look on the AFC side and you look at Mahomes and you look at Allen, I mean, even some of the other quarterbacks that were in the playoffs, you go to Lamar Jackson, you go Breeze really wasn't as mobile, but there are times that like the pocket breaks down and he takes off scrambles and slides. Like just by being mobile enough to keep the defense honest, there's a variable that someone has to keep an eye on the quarterback, and it allows some of those deeper routes to get open.
That's exactly what I think Russell Wilson does so well. He's not like running downfield, but he's able to get down and slide good. Probably because he played baseball. Not a lot of quarterbacks even know how to slide still, which is baffling to me. Like you would think they would take a weekend and only practice sliding. Like a couple times a year. Like if I was coach, that's what I would have them do. Because I see even guys in college, it's like, what were you doing? You're gonna hurt your knee? Because you're gonna go high, you're gonna leave your head open to get absolutely blasted. But I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I think Aaron Rodgers right now, his legacy to me is just like a poor man's Ben Roethlisberger because he only got the one Super Bowl, got it early in his career. Ben Roethlisberger did the same thing. Both had locker room issues where they should be able to at least make more Super Bowl appearances. Ben Roethlisberger, unfortunately, had Tom Brady in his conference. There's zero reason why Aaron Rodgers should only have, the one Super Bowl. Has he even been to another one? I think we talked about this and I never looked it up. That's it. And now he was 25. Patrick Mahomes is 25 right now. He's going to be in his second Super Bowl, and he has a chance to chase Tom Brady. If he keeps Tom Brady at 6 wins, he's only 25. He would already have 2. I mean, that's a good chance for him because, I'm not saying you could say, oh, Tom Brady's a GOAT. That's undisputed. No one's going to get to 10 Super Bowls. But if you're using kind of like the LeBron James, Michael Jordan analysis right there, people look at a LeBron and they count him out because he didn't win as many. He only has 4 wins out of 10 appearances. Not good. And he's been chasing them because I thought about this too. Michael Jordan, he could have chased other championships, but he didn't. Karl Malone went to the Lakers to chase a championship. I think it was Malone. That could have been Michael Jordan. Instead, he went to Washington to try to do it by himself. And he only has 6 championships, 6-0. I think that's a more of an alpha thing. I know it's not as good as what Tom Brady did because Washington didn't have the pieces. They did have a number 1 draft pick that Jordan picked, and he was trying to play with because he thought I could build around this guy. Didn't work out.
Part of the Jordan issue is that he left to go play baseball and then came back. That's like Brady just taking off peak years and then coming back and trying to win this Super Bowl.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think him and Brady are comparable. They're the best in their sport, and that's why. Jordan left and he tried to just do his own thing. It wasn't like he was teaming up because, like I said, he could have went to the Lakers. The Lakers weren't going to say no. Michael Jordan, are you kidding? We don't need you. They would have 100% took him over Karl Malone, and it would have been Kobe, Michael Jordan, and Shaq. That would have just been ridiculous. And then he could have had 3 or 4 more rings and then untouchable. But instead, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to Washington because back then, they didn't team up. And that's why the one thing with Tom Brady, it's not like he had a bunch of his friends have their contracts go out at the same exact year, and then they all went to Tampa Bay together. He's picking up scraps to take with him. But the Mahomes thing, I think if Mahomes goes, let's say he only makes 6 Super Bowls, but he wins them all, I think he has an argument against Tom Brady. But this is his good chance. If he loses this one, he's spotting Tom Brady at 7th. And that makes it even tougher because then you lose a year. But just because he's so young, and that's going to be my question to you, do you think he'll have a drop-off? Because I think the last guy that I thought had a legitimate chance would have been Russell Wilson back when they had the run with the Seahawks. They've fallen off since. He has no chance now. So do you think the Chiefs, they have more weapons now than Tom Brady has ever had in his career? He's never had, I guess he's had a Kelsey on and off with Hernandez and then Gronk, but he's never had a Tyreek Hill. So what do you think career-wise? Do you think when those contracts are gone, do you think he's going to slowly fall off like a Russell Wilson or even an Aaron Rodgers did?
I don't know. I think a lot of it depends on how long. I think they're young enough, and their line is in a really good spot that they have the potential to make a pretty decent run. one of the things watching Tampa Bay that I kind of this Super Bowl and watching Tampa reminds me of the year Manning won the Super Bowl with Denver.
I thought you were going to say Gruden. I was going to say, don't even bring up Gruden.
I wasn't bringing up Gruden, but I am going to bring up Denver, where Manning signed. He was old. He had all kinds of issues, and the defense carried him. Brady's throwing 3 picks in the NFC Championship game, and if Green Bay had a quarterback with a spine, they would have scored. They would have capitalized on those possessions instead of punting, and we would have been looking at Green Bay in the Super Bowl.
But you're talking about a team that they put up 30 points in each of their playoff games. Like, they've been scoring. He might have threw three interceptions, but he also had 3 touchdowns. So I don't think, like I said, that Broncos team, they were winning before Peyton Manning got there. Because it's not like, oh, he came there and he was like, oh, yeah, you know what? You guys have been out of the playoffs for 13 years. Like, they beat the Steelers in 2011. And then they lost the divisional round in 2012 with Peyton Manning. And then he came in 2013 and they lost the Super Bowl to the Seahawks. So it finally it took him like 4 years to get to the Super Bowl. And they, like I said, they already had the team in 2011. They beat the Steelers in overtime with Tim Tebow. So they were kind of just like a quarterback away. The Buccaneers, they weren't a quarterback away. They were a quarterback away from, like you said, Bruce Arians being fired.
Well, yeah, that's not according to their owner. Their owner said they needed one quarterback, and it changed their whole franchise.
Right? He said he needed one guy to teach his team how to win. That's the key statement. To teach his team, because he knew, he's like, these guys are losers. We need a guy that's going to win. You can't just count on these guys. But like, just looking back, because I'm looking at this thing, like Peyton Manning, of course he needed help that year with the defense, because he was already, I guess he was probably less than Tom Brady's age at that point. But that 4th year, he already had the HGH controversy where he said his wife was on it. Remember that? They're like, why did you get HGH delivered to your house? He's like, me, that's my wife that's bulking up. And just to my point, their scores, 23-16, 20-18, and 24-10. They didn't break 30 points once. Like, Tom Brady has got them, they're scoring the ball. They're scoring the ball more than they have with them. And it's not like their defense is keeping them down. Like, they're still giving up a lot of points themselves. Like, could you imagine if they held a team to like 10 points? They couldn't even hold Washington to 10 points. That score, what was that score? Ended up being 23. They gave up 23 points to Washington, 20 to the Saints, and 26 to the Packers.
You mean the conference champion Washington football team?
And what did I say? The Redskins?
You don't need to treat them like the doormat of the NFC. Put some respect on Ron Rivera.
That team, they killed the Panthers with Cam Newton at 10 in the Super Bowl. Could you imagine if they came out and held Mahomes to 10 points on Tampa defense? Then on the after show of the Super Bowl, then you can tell me that Tom Brady walked into a great defense. If that happens, I'll say, you know what, you're right, man. They did hold him to 27 in the regular season? And I did think, ooh, this is close for the Chiefs, because it was at home. The Super Bowl's at home. And they lost, and it came down to the wire. But I did think, like, there were some throws where Tom Brady wasn't looking his best in that game. And I thought if he played a little bit more on, they could win against the Chiefs. So we'll see if it happens. Tough to beat them at home twice. Or I guess for the Chiefs on the road twice. So that's my thing. I'm just talking legacies today after the big week. We'll get into some of the pre-Super Bowl stuff next week as we go. Matt, did you have anything else on the Super Bowl or any of the games this weekend?
No.
I mean, that was pretty much it. The Chiefs, they blew out the Bills, so I wasn't really going to talk about it much. I was hoping for a Bills-Buccaneers Super Bowl because I thought that would have been awesome. Two teams that haven't been there. I've seen a lot of people complaining, oh, get some new teams in there. It's like the Buccaneers haven't won a playoff game for 20 years. What are you talking about? The Chiefs finally won one. Andy Reid hadn't won a Super Bowl in however many years he's been coaching, 30 years. Like they're kind of some new teams in. The only thing people are hating on is that it's Tom Brady. Like, yeah, he's been there for 10 years, but you got to admit, this is special because no guy just decides to go to another team and then immediately takes them to the Super Bowl. Even Peyton Manning took 4 years. I mean, I guess they took 2, but he lost the first one and he came back. I still think if Brady wins it, just retire and then that's it. Like, because that's all you need. If he comes back and he goes through like a Brett Favre like slide down, then I think you're like, what are you doing? You're 45. Go get something else to do. Go become a coach somewhere. Go coach at your kid's high school or something like that.
He's waiting to play with his son.
That would be crazy. Getting into like the coaching outcomes, there was one thing that I had up here. The Ravens, they were worried that they were going to lose their coordinators, but it looks like they didn't, which is key for the Steelers, although depending on what Ben does, I'm not really high on them. And also before we get here, Matt Stafford is available. The Lions are making him available. They signed Haskins. It's like, why? Did you not know? He went to Ohio State. Ohio State has 0 players in the Super Bowl because they don't work as pros. They run a gimmick offense, Matt. They don't work out. Their guys aren't studs. Michigan has 7 guys in the Super Bowl, tied with LSU. Those are 2 great programs led by great players like Tom Brady. So I'm just throwing that out there. Haskins, like, where are you seeing? Like, did you not see what happened in Washington? They made the playoffs and looked better without him. Why are you wasting that contract? You could have went for Matt Stafford and told Ben, like, look, we don't know what you're doing, but the team's a mess. You're not helping the locker room. We need a guy that could come in, and maybe Stafford's not that guy, but you never know with a change of scenery. Maybe he can come in. It's not like he's lost. He just hasn't had a franchise that knew how to put teams together. How many wide receivers and tight ends does a team have to draft before you'd realize, like, hey, this isn't working out for us? So that's my thing there. But the Ravens, keeping their guys, I don't know if that's good or bad, but they did lose linebackers coach, who's going to be the defensive coordinator at the University of Michigan, and they're supposed to lose their defensive backs coach to become the defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt. I don't think that one's official yet. I'm pretty sure the Michigan one is. So the Ravens are going to have some key turnovers on defense. Of course, we talked about the Steelers getting rid of their offensive coordinator. That's going to come into play. But there's some other big ones. I was surprised that Robert Saleh went to the Jets. I don't know if we mentioned these last week, just because I thought he had a better chance to just go to a better team. I mean, my man Urban Meyer went to the Jaguars, and there's supposed to be some stuff in place for him to help get eased into that transition. I don't know if it's going to work out. I think the big thing that we'll talk about with him is when he gets his quarterback. If he doesn't take Trevor Lawrence, I'll be shocked. Like, he needs to take him and then show that his offense can fit in the NFL. But Matt, go ahead. I know you had some coach stuff that you wanted to hit on before I continue.
I know over the last couple weeks that a lot of the major outlets were talking about Kansas City offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy and like trying to push for him to be a named head coach somewhere. The one name that I will throw out, that underdog, that I didn't realize this until I did a little bit of research, was Jim Caldwell. He had a above 500 record. He was 554, and he had previously coached at the Lions, and I believe had them in the playoffs before. So I mean, to be able to turn around the Lions, you have to be doing something right. And I think that was one of those ones that if you're a team looking for a coach and not knowing the giant asterisk with Bieniemy is that he's in Kansas City and Andy Reid's calling the play. So how much of that, it goes back to, does he have control? Like, what is it that he's contributing or bringing to the offense? With most of the team saying it's Andy Reid.
And I mean, there's something like he interviews, and they either find something in his background checks or just whatever they get, he's not getting the offers. I mean, the Texans right now, they haven't hired anyone that I'm aware of. And so that could be a landing spot for him. The later it goes, the more I think it's going to happen. Just because, like you said, he's with the Chiefs. He's still coaching. It's not like he's going to leave before the Super Bowl. And if I was him, I wouldn't either. Because if you're having trouble landing a job, you need more stuff on your resume. Another Super Bowl win would go a long way, I think. Because at that point, you're going to be like, look, there's something wrong that he's not getting the jobs. And then would he jump to college then? Because I'm sure a big-time program. I mean, Texas just hired Steve Sarkisian, who was hired last time he was a head coach. He was drunk at a team events and got fired. Like, if Bieniemy's not getting a gig, like, just go to college, because down there, it doesn't seem like they care. Like, past doesn't matter. So
just go to Nick Saban boot camp.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it takes. So the Texans, that's the one where I think he could fit in. The other ones, it was like they weren't just going to wait for him. I thought maybe the Falcons, but they jumped at Arthur Smith instead. Tennessee offensive coordinator, which was surprising to me just because of how run heavy they are. So that was going to be a shift for the Falcons because they were kind of built on spread before that. The Lions went with Dan Campbell, the tight end coach for the Saints. And it was almost like what are you doing? And I know some people were excited about the hire because you really don't know, and how could they be any worse? But they're a team that needs a guy that knows how to win. Maybe Bieniemy would have fit in there, just trying to get some of the Andy Reid culture stuff in place. But I don't know. Of course, like the Jaguars got Urban Meyer. To me, that would have been the top coach. Anyone else you're taking a risk on. He has had coaching experience. His win percentage is like 800%. Like the only other guy that you're going to get that has a win percentage high is possibly Jim Harbaugh, but he's fallen off with his time at Michigan. I think his win percentage is like 700, and that's with Michigan and with the NFL and Stanford. So Urban's was higher, and Urban beat him like, 5-6 times? So I would say Urban number one, maybe Jim Harbaugh if you're looking for a guy that can win consistently. But like some of the other guys, like they keep throwing around Marvin Lewis, it's like, would you take a shot at someone else that's won before, or a guy that is 0-7 in the playoffs? Like, you're going to give a new guy a shot. You're going to give Soleil a shot like you're just going to. Everyone knew that was going to happen. Like I said, I'm just surprised that the Jets went that round. Maybe he thought with their team, he could focus more on defense. They didn't get the number one pick, so they're not going to be focused on taking another quarterback. Look for them to trade down. That's my thing. I don't think he's going to move away from Darnold. Because I knew if he was, they would have already put it out like the Lions have done with Matt Stafford. That's why I thought the Steelers could draft on him. Steelers half the salary of what Ben Roethlisberger needs right now. Bring him in. Don't mess around with Haskins. I mean, I guess you could have him learn a year under whatever. You get 2 years with Stafford. Move on. See if the team can actually win without Ben. Because in the playoffs, you're getting bad Ben. It's almost like Tom Brady bad without the 3 touchdowns to go with it. You're just getting the interceptions. So it's like, oh, well, thanks for showing up, Ben. Anything else? Any big other ones? I mean, the Eagles hired Nick Sirianni. I don't know how to say that, from the Colts, which was a shock to me because the Colts weren't even known for good offense until they got Phillip Rivers. So was he really the mastermind there? And they even said in their thing, they wanted a coach that would let Wentz develop. Like, develop. The dude's how old now? He already had a chance. Like, he's inaccurate. You can't be inaccurate in the NFL. So I'm watching their downfall, and I'm loving it. So I hope that hire blows up in their face, and then they're going to look at it. I mean, the dude's 28. Patrick Mahomes is 25. Like, you're going to know if your guy's good or not by the time he's closing in on 30. He'll be, 29 next year? I don't know when his birthday is. But bringing in an offensive coordinator that could develop him, next thing you know, you're in a Matt Stafford situation where you're like, all right, I guess we just need to move on and try someone else. So that's my last thing on the coaching stuff. You got anything else for the NFL ones?
No, I think I'm good for now.
Yeah, your boy Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator. Bring in Matt Stafford. Move some guys around. I think he could fit in that.
No, we don't need another. No.
You don't need another one, Matt.
They don't need another old quarterback.
He's not that old. He's 30-something.
Well, yeah, when you're done slobbering over Tom Brady being 45 and playing in the playoffs,
Matt Stafford's 32. He's not old. If they're investing in Wentz, you get Stafford for 2 years for fairly cheap, and you'll know if you have anything with them or not. You're signing Haskins to take a risk. At least get Stafford to back it up. And people are already saying that, no, they're not going to trade. The Steelers aren't going to trade for Matt Stafford. Why not? What if they could even just put Haskins in that trade? Say, hey, just take this guy. And I know they have Mason Rudolph, and everyone's saying, oh, well, they're going to do this. They have more than $34 million over the salary. They're more than $34 million over the salary cap. But if Ben leaves, I think then they have room. So you're saying oh, well, they're going to do this. They're going to make some moves. Trade some of your cap space. See what the Lions are going to do. That's my thing. But I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think Steelers fans are going to like next year. I think you're starting to get into a rebuild, which we'll get into here with Pittsburgh.
It depends on what they want to do with the offensive coordinator. If Canada is the guy, then are they going to go heavy quarterback evaluation and try to bring another quarterback in?
Well, he's the guy that's listed as the official offensive coordinator now.
Okay. Because I knew there was the last I checked, it was they were working on the contract, but it wasn't definitive, and they were looking to bring in some other people in too. And it just seemed like a messy situation.
I don't know. That's what it is right now. But like I said, we don't know what the roster is even going to shake out as. So I think they can make some move and cut some things. I mean, if TJ Watt and stuff wants out, that's a pretty big piece that you could move. And it even if the Lions are just trying to build some type of semblance of a team, you could try to do something and win with the pieces you have. If guys want out, try to get some return now. And then, because then you're going to have to just implode everything probably. In college, speaking of imploding, the Tennessee Volunteers get investigated by the NCAA and pretty much confirmed they were paying players again?
They're paying players. It was just giving them McDonald's bags of money.
And I know that there were a couple. I think there was a recruit, one of the ones that was suspended from their bowl game. He was a Michigan commit, and on the last day, flipped to Tennessee. I think we know why now. Whenever the NCAA says, yeah, you better not play this bowl game because you're under investigation. So, I mean, you can look up the names if you want, because I'm not going to throw kids under the bus, because it's not really them. It's the program. But the way they were doing it with McDonald's bags, I think that's been confirmed. That's just crazy to me, that they would get sloppy with, hey, we brought you your Happy Meal, and he opens up, it's just wads of hundreds. And that's why I still think, pay the players. The NCAA is fighting back on it. Tennessee's going to pay the players no matter what. At least if you're a big-time recruit and a team's going to pitch you and say, look, come to our squad. We're going to go ahead and we're going to promote you. You're going to have a chance to do this, this, and this, and we're going to help build for you long-term success. I think then you're going to have more of an even field. A smaller school, let's say, down here Wake Forest, they can say look, you're going to be the guy. We're the guys, we've had Chris Paul, even basketball, we've had Tim Duncan. We're going to build you. You're going to be the guy. They might be able to steal a 5-star or two away from Alabama. They're not going to probably be able to build their whole team up, but I really think it's going to balance things out. Because, like, it only takes a couple guys. Look at Ole Miss. When they were winning with Hugh Freeze, was it Hugh Freeze or the coach before them? What was his name?
Houston Nutt?
Was it Houston Nutt? When they were dropping bags, too? And, like, was it not Laramie Tunsil? He's the guy that was at the draft with the gas ball. There was another guy.
Kendiche.
No, it was the wide receiver. Treadwell? Is that one? Where he had pictures. He went out to his recruiting event and just had pictures with wads of cash and girls on them. And so it was like, oh, of course the NCAA is going to name you in the picture. Like, you're going to be in the, like, whatever the NCAA, they're not lawsuits, but the allegations or whatever they call them. But I was like, you've got to be kidding me that you go ahead and have a team like that. They really only had how many people, and it is Treadwell. He posts pictures of him with girls kissing him. They gave him a ring, a championship ring. Like, I don't know if it was a diamond ring or if it was fake. And then he just had, looks like hundreds. Just like a stack of money that he posted on his Instagram. So that was a long time ago. Whenever they had, whatever it was, like before Instagram was even real big. I think it was even known by Facebook back then. So, like, some of the kids, they don't know. Now it would probably be TikTok. They think, like, or Snapchat. They think it's going to disappear in like a couple seconds. But some other guy takes a screenshot and then it's over. But Tennessee then had to fire their coach in the middle of the year. And now they start a brand new search. And they say that fans aren't going to be disappointed. I don't know, number one, who you get this late. A lot of the guys that I thought could be possible to move to Tennessee would have been already taken. Like Mike Leach, I think, would have been a great target for them last time. He ends up in Mississippi State. We'll see if it pays off for them. They had a rough first year, but everyone kind of did because of coronavirus. So is he going to be able to get everything installed there? I think Tennessee would have had a few more advantages for him as a coach compared to Mississippi State. But Tennessee, they're going to have to pull a trick out of their hat because this is getting late in the recruiting run where they're going to have to pull out almost like Michigan State did where they got Mel Tucker. And, he beat Michigan the first year. I don't know if that was really an accomplishment. But we'll see if that pays off for them or if it's going to be downhill and if Tennessee is going to follow that same thing. Get a guy late that's not really your guy after being turned down. Could they possibly go after a guy like Luke Fickell? Ohio's pretty close to Tennessee. He has a ton of recruiting things there. I don't know if his name's being thrown around. The big one is going to be your guy, Hugh Freeze. Do you think he's a legitimate candidate?
I'm sure that they're going to try to see about getting him, but realistically, if you're Hugh Freeze, why would you ever leave Liberty? With the amount of money that they're willing to invest, or they've shown that they're willing to invest in their athletic programs, they have right now, with what they're building, they're independent, so they almost get for lack of better wording, they're getting like a Notre Dame-ish treatment where they're playing independent and can schedule who they want. They're playing really competitive ball right now. Like they're one of those teams that they're right on the cusp of making a giant leap. To me, he can stay at Liberty right now for probably as long as he wants. If he goes to Tennessee, his hot seat's starting immediately.
Well, so let's go through the other rundown because that's the one thing where I think if you're at Liberty, why would you leave? You see other guys and what they've gone through. Like Ole Miss kind of threw him under the bus with everything. We don't know what was true and what was fake with that. But like look at Rich Rod leaving West Virginia. I still hate the way that went down. I wish Rich Rod would have had support at Michigan. But it was like, look, you're close enough to winning the national championship at West Virginia. I know Liberty's not at that spot yet. But with as much money that they're throwing around right now, you would have to think out of all the schools, if the money thing starts to come into play, where you're able to pay recruits actual like money, Liberty would shoot right to the top. And I think that's what a lot of the bigger schools are afraid of. You don't want to get into a bidding war because Liberty's endowment and everything with their donors is already ahead of a lot of other schools that you're going to be competing with. And it's only a matter of time before they're up with the big dogs and they're going to have money thrown around like the Michigans and the Notre Dames. Like, that's just a fact. So I think that's what scares a lot of people. It's like, you don't want them throwing around Texas money in the middle of Virginia because that's going to hurt the ACC. And then you're really relying on Clemson or Florida State. And then that's it. Because if Liberty's going to take all those guys out of the Virginia area where like Virginia Tech got built up, they'll never come back. Virginia Tech will never be back. I'll say that now. Like, the Mike Vick days are in the past. They can't let Hughes Freeze get something going there. And I think right now he'd be crazy to leave. But for Tennessee, they're looking at Tony Elliott, which is a name that came up in the Michigan coaching search. So I did some research for him. He's the Clemson offensive coordinator. I would like that move, but I'm still not sold. We don't know what he is as a head coach. And number two, you don't know if you can recreate what Dabo Swinney has at Clemson. Josh Heupel from UCF is another one. He didn't build that program. Scott Frost in Nebraska has been a disaster. I don't know why Harbaugh's name gets thrown around a lot and Scott Frost does not, because he's done nothing. Someone even wrote an article comparing Scott Frost and Harbaugh, saying how they've both been awful. It's like Harbaugh's worst season before this year was 8-4. Scott Frost hasn't even come close to 8 wins. They're not comparable at all. If he was anyone else except for an alum, he would have been fired already. I mean, Willie Taggart got fired, and he was having a better years than Scott Frost, Matt. So I don't even know why anyone would touch a UCF coach. In Tennessee, if they think that's going to get fans excited, they're nuts. Lane Kiffin, if they flip Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss, that's the most Tennessee thing I've ever heard. You run the guy, well, I guess he ran out on you. Ran to USC, bombed out there, and then he's going to come back and be your savior? That's just a cruel joke. Like, he's not even, I could see if he was like winning like the West and then they nabbed him, but like, he hasn't won anything. Like, what's the difference if he comes there? Nothing. They have Billy Napier at Louisiana. That's another one. I'm not really sure because I thought he would have got an offer from South Carolina and he didn't. So is there issues there? Like, is there something else? Could be a jump for him. The other ones, like Hugh Freeze we mentioned, Gus Malzahn, how's that going to be something that pumps you up? I know he beats Alabama every once in a while, so it would be a step up for Tennessee, but people are excited for him to be fired. The one that would stand out to me is Chris Peterson, because he's one of the ones that I thought if Harbaugh did go to the NFL, I would have wanted Michigan to take a run at, because he built up Boise and he had Washington competing with USC in recruiting to the level where they were in a playoff game. That just doesn't really happen. I know he doesn't really have any recruiting ties on the East Coast, and the head coaching stuff kind of stressed him out to the point where he stepped back, kind of like Urban Meyer, but it didn't stop Urban Meyer from rebuilding a couple years later and a couple other years later. So who knows if they could lure him away. To me, that would be, if you can't get Hugh Freeze, you're going to be talking about how great your fans are going to be pumped up. That's the only name on this list, because there's a couple other ones, like even Tom Herman. Like, that's a joke, right? That's going to get your fans pumped up, Tom Herman. So I think Chris Peterson or bust for Tennessee. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. I don't know who they're going to get, because who outside of someone like me that would be willing to step in, like with nothing to lose. There's nothing about that situation, the possible sanctions hanging over the program, the other possible issues. I mean, one name that might make sense would be Bill O'Brien. and he just accepted a position at Alabama because he handled the fallout from Penn State. He handled that situation well and understanding how to navigate a program that's under a lot of scrutiny. Like, he would be possibly a fit there.
Well, he handled that awesome to the point where he basically made their sanctions like nothing. He took them, and they've had worse years. Like, even more recently, they looked worse this year than they did under Bill O'Brien, I thought, which is crazy because of how many players were allowed to leave and everything. And just some jokes, some of the fan names that they're throwing out there is like James Franklin. Why would James Franklin leave Penn State to come to your sanction-riddled school? I would be I'd be shocked if he did. But it's funny that they're throwing that name out there, and they've also thrown out PJ Fleck from Minnesota. And I don't think that that's another one that's probably going to be serious because he's in Minnesota. Now, granted, he is more of like the CEO type coach, where I think if Chris Peterson came in and they said, look, we're going to give you top dollar, a long-term contract, and we're going to keep you kind of distanced. Because I think, did Phil Fulmer, did he retire or whatever? I think he got out of it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, he said he was going to help select the next coach, and then he was going to retire.
And so, like, getting a Chris Peterson type guy where you're kind of putting your thing into place and getting ready for like an Urban Meyer at Ohio State, because he was still touching the program, whether people want to admit that or not at Ohio State. So now I wonder, with him going to Jacksonville, how many of those analysts and friends and stuff that he had with the program are going to come with him to Jacksonville, and what's going to happen with Ohio State now that that influence is gone? Because he's not going to be able to influence Ohio State anymore and be at practice like he was if he's at Jacksonville. So is Fulmer going to step away and allow a guy like Peterson to build that? I don't know if there's anyone else on this list that, to me, would inspire confidence like that. Maybe you could lure James Franklin by talking about like that type of long-term thing, but he's been mentioned at like USC and possibly Texas before. So it's like, just hang on a few more years. You might get that big call anyway. You never know if USC is going to bomb out or if Texas is going to bomb out again, or even Florida State. Like, you don't know. So he could possibly get another big-time offer and just take that. I think Tennessee is too big of a risk. Anything else on the Tennessee situation? Because I know we're going to be following that the next couple weeks.
Right now, just something to keep an eye on.
Last thing I have, the Pirates. I just wanted to mention it. They are rebuilding again. I had a friend text me. They're like, hey, what do you think about the Pirates this year? I was like, I don't even know. It's to the point where it's like a sad, cruel joke where they're like, do you think their games are going to be on TV? No. No, they don't put the worst team on TV. And like Major League Baseball, they should end blackouts. I think the NHL should do the same, which I was going to bring up. NBC Sports, their network is supposed to end. Like, they're going to get rid of it, which is where all the hockey games were. And there's rumors that they're going to push them towards USA and their new Peacock streaming. So if you're going to want to watch NHL games, you might have to subscribe to NHL.tv to get the non-blackout ones, and possibly NBC Sports, or I guess which would be on their new Peacock streaming app, which to me is just ridiculous. And then there are rumors that the NHL is looking for more of a 2-network deal for their next television deal, where they're leaning towards maybe Fox Sports again and ESPN, if they can get it, instead of NBC. So that's something to watch too. But for the Pirates, like we've talked about, what's the point in following baseball if that's the Pittsburgh team? Like, there's zero confidence for me that they'll be any good under Bob Nutting forever. Do you agree?
I totally feel that. And I feel like it's been the better part of 30 years that they've been saying that they need to rebuild and they need to get better players and they need to build the farm system and it's this and that and everything else. And they have nothing to show for it.
And everyone always says, first tweet that I saw was, hey, the Steelers won that because they're grading the minor leaguers as an upgrade over who they're losing. And it was like, are you serious? We've been hearing that for 20 years. How? They only need this many new guys in the farm system. And then once they get up there, they trade them away. Like, you have to take that next step and sign guys and keep a few guys. And like the Buccaneers owner said, you need a guy to teach your team how to win. And if you keep trading those guys away and not bringing in anyone that knows how to win, you're never going to win. Never going to win. So that's me closing the book on the Pirates. We'll be covering some Major League Baseball stuff since it'll be football off season, but like, why? If they go on a big run, I'll come out and eat crow, but I'm pretty sure we'll never see them be successful under current ownership. You can keep believing. I've been saying that for 5 years to begin with. I mean, we used to have other people on the show, and I think it would annoy them when I would say that. But, like, doesn't that prove me right, Matt?
Pretty much.
I mean, I can sit here and talk trash, and I know, like, if you're listening to the show, and that's where I got a lot of heat, it was like, oh, you're not following baseball as much. You say you watch it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, look, I can win fantasy baseball championships because I know the sport. So you can't say, like, oh, you have no background. If I was not doing anything in baseball, I could see. But I know enough about who's winning, what type of players you need and to be successful. And so it's just a shame. So we'll follow it. We'll keep some baseball stuff on the docket in the summer, but I just wanted to bring that up because I know it's bad. The last thing I had, because I already mentioned the NBC stuff for NHL, because the Penguins started the exact same record they started with last year, Matt, in the first like 6 games or so. But we'll be hitting them up. Got to wait till the Super Bowl's over, though. College basketball, the thing we usually cover next. The NCAA lost anywhere between $600 million and $800 million last year because of the college basketball tournament being canceled. And I don't know what's going to happen this year, but I think that they're going to play. I'm worried that it's going to be pushed back and delayed, and it's not going to be anything like what we're used to seeing. And I really hope some teams don't get screwed out of it. Like, a lot of the Blue Bloods have looked awful this year. I would hate for some smaller conference to be left out or something just because of, coronavirus setting in. I joked about them just doing a Final Four and marketing the hell out of that. I think it would still get big-time viewership. I don't know if they'll cut the field or what they're going to do, but I wouldn't be shocked if something happened because right now the new coronavirus strain that's going around has Michigan shut down. Their sports shut down for 2 weeks. And I'm only thinking that it's going to go through every team again because now they're saying you can get it twice, which I didn't think was possible. That's why I thought a lot of the college football players were getting coronavirus. And then, like, eventually, once everyone had it or had the antibodies, you'd be good. And then you wouldn't have to worry about it as a team. But if the new one can get you sick twice, how are you going to play for real with college kids that aren't getting paid? The NFL, they're getting paid millions and they're playing for a Super Bowl. They're not going to mess it up. Like, could you imagine if Tom Brady got coronavirus this week?
No, the NFL would push the Super Bowl back.
It would be so mind-boggling that people would be like, well, what was he doing? Like, he should just be in a pod right now. But with college kids, you can't have that. Kids are going back to campus. So that's my thing. I want there to be March Madness. Michigan looks like they have a great team. But, man, I'll be shocked if it happens and, like, go smoothly with their everyone meet in Indiana plan. So that's my final bell. You got anything for the final bell, or you want to hit on that or anything?
No, I do want to see the NCAA tournament happen because I like Florida State's chances. They're finally stopped treating it like they have to shoot a three-pointer every time. So they should be back in the top 25 here and ready to defend our national championship.
What, from last year when they claimed one?
Yes. when they should have claimed one.
Hey, I still say claim it. I mean, the only downside is I know a couple conferences didn't have tournaments, but like if Michigan would have won the Big Ten last year, I would have said claim it. Claim everything that you can. And I still think teams should have done that for football. But that's my thing. That's all we have. We'll be getting into some of the more technical Super Bowl stuff next week. Just talking hypotheticals this week because Tom Brady makes another one. Just crazy. I know I'm getting a lot of hate for him, but whatever. He's a legend. You just got to watch it and sit back. And like watching Aaron Rodgers, people aren't going to say, I remember Aaron Rodgers when he would play. Awesome. Like no one's going to tell their kid that. They're going to be like, hey, I watched Tom Brady play. Hey, I watched Michael Jordan play. Those are the guys you remember. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.